All right. What is going on, everybody? My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach at Sabersim. And here on the Run Pure Sports Sabersim office hours show here for today, you've just got me here today. No AP with me today. He had to go take off and take care of something else, but I'm excited to be on the show here today. If this is your first time watching me on this show here, I typically come on here once a week with the RPS team, talk a little bit about Sabersim, how to use our optimizer to build better DFS lineups. We've got some exciting new features to walk through on the Sabersim app here today, a couple of changes we've made in the past week. And the reason we do this live here is so you guys can ask me questions. So if you have questions for me, fire away in the Discord channel or in the YouTube chat here. And let's go ahead and get into it. Of course, you know, the reason why I'm here, Sabersim and Run Pure have a partnership here. If you're already signed up with Run Pure Sports, you can add on the Sabersim optimizer, take advantage of our entry editor, our simulations, our lineup building tools, to take advantage of the Run Pure content that you're already getting there. So I'm going to go ahead here and just start diving in. I've been teasing this release here for the past couple weeks. I've been on this show. If you've been playing around with Sabersim in the past week, you've probably seen some of the changes here already. I think for those of you that are already a little bit more familiar with the Sabersim workflow, especially with the entry editor and a few things like that, you're really going to feel a difference with some of the new tools here. So we'll go ahead and just dive in here. And I'm actually going to start. We'll do a build from the main slate here for tonight. I built this right before we started the show, and I just want to start walking through some of the new features here. So the first one, and probably I think the one that I'm most excited about, been a long time coming, is you can now fill your entries from a build directly in the build screen. So I know that the entry editor used to be kind of siloed off on the app. It used to be, you know, you do all your work in the build, you'd get all your projections and your exposures and everything the way you wanted them to be. Then you had to go back to the entry editor, fill them. You know, if you had a lot of different builds, you'd have to do that multiple times. You can now just one click fill entries. You'll get the screen to download your entries file, drag and drop, and you're right away filling your lineups that you've just built into your entries here from this screen. So you know, the same tools are available to you that you've been used to in the previous version of the entry editor. You can sort by GPP, cache, multiplier, satellites. You can fill with different fill methods here. So if you want a unique lineup in every contest, that's great. If you want the top lineups in all of your top contests, that's the rank fill method. That's great. Fill all entries. In this case, I only have 20 lineups. I have a lot more than 20 entries, so I'm going to have to duplicate a few of them. That's okay for the demo here. And then again, one click, we're download all entries, download and open DraftKings, and we're back up onto DK, uploading our entries file, and we're good to go. So again, it's not new. I wouldn't say it's new entry editor functionality here specifically, but just a better workflow, especially if you're the type that you're playing a lot of different contests. You've got multiple different builds. Maybe you're playing a lot of different slates. Just saves you so much time in terms of getting those lineups over to the sites. So I wanted to then kind of jump in here and talk about one of the other features that went live with this release here. And this is now the ability to send your work, your projections, your custom projections and exposures from one build back to the projection screen, back to the home screen. If you've used Sabersim in the past, you know, one of the coolest things that we can do here is that we can adjust our exposures to certain players in the build screen to dial in our lineups, right? Maybe we built some lineups here for this 20 max and we like Ohtani tonight, but we don't want 100% exposure to Ohtani, right? We can tone down that exposure here, just get to say 50% or so instead. And we'll sort through the pool of 500 lineups we built for this contest and find the best 20 where all of the exposures here are honored. Let's say also maybe we don't want to go crazy on Nola either. We only want 60% Nola. We can cap his exposure down here. Pretty good pitching slate here, looks like tonight already. So, and then maybe we want to get a little bit of leverage on Frankie Montas, right? So just changing around these exposures. Now, if you spend a lot of time on this, you've put a lot of work getting all your lineups in exactly where they need to be, and then you're ready. You're ready to build final lineups for the slate, right? You need to do a brand new, fresh build. In the past, there was no way to get this information, these exposures. Let's do some custom projections here too, real quick, just so I can have a projection here. Let's bump Harper down to 8 points. There was no way to get this out of the build and back into the projection screen. You can now do this with this little button here. You can either send your custom projections, your custom exposures, or both back to the projection screen. When you do this, one thing to be aware of, it will overwrite everything you've got on that home screen. So if you did some work over there on the home screen, if you uploaded some custom projections or you did some tweaks over there, it's going to overwrite everything. But we can go ahead and send these back to the projection screen. And when we come back here, we'll have everything that we loaded in here. So I know a lot of you guys out there like to really dive in deep with those exposures, set exposures to a bunch of different players, get a build totally fine-tuned and dialed in. Now, if you've spent all that work up front and then something happens, you know, a key pitcher on the slate gets scratched or something like that, you can do a fresh build and keep track of all of those old exposures that you were using from before. So pretty slick there, pretty useful. Let's jump over to the entry editor itself now and talk a little bit about how this has changed here. It hasn't changed a ton, should look pretty familiar to what you're used to. You probably won't need to go into the entry editor as much as you used to before, right? You used to have to come here every single time when you were done building your lineups to fill your lineups into your entries. Now, pretty straightforward, right? It's a nice home base here. If you need to come in and make any changes, you have all the same functionality that you do in a build. If you need to change anything around, use a different fill method, pick different lineups, you can do all that here. On the left-hand side, this is still a pretty useful summary of your exposures to different players. If you want to see how exposed you are to different players here, your different lineup exposure. So what percentage of unique lineups have a certain player in them, and also your entry exposure. So what percentage of unique entries have a player in them. That is a new feature as well of visualizing these numbers a little bit differently. You'll see for me here right now, they're about the same. And that's because I put a unique lineup into every single entry. Right? If we changed this to something like rank, where I'm putting the top lineups in I'm putting my top lineups first into every contest first, you can kind of see how these change, right? So you'll see I'll actually get a very different entry exposure now here compared to my lineup exposure based on how those entries fill. So two different ways to visualize this. One thing you'll see that's kind of missing here, especially if you're familiar with the entry editor, right? There's no way to edit projections and exposures in the entries tab anymore. And the reason for that is that now all builds you run on Sabersim, including late swap builds, new builds, everything always listens to the projections and the min exposures you set on the projections tab. If you were late swapping in the past with the older versions of Sabersim, one thing you probably were aware of was kind of a pain is that you'd have these two sets of exposures where you'd have to manage your exposures on the home screen for new builds, and you'd have to manage exposures in the entries tab for late swap builds. Now everything very conveniently managed from the projections tab. This is your home base. This is your foundation for the slate. If you want to make an adjustment here, set a min and max exposure, that kind of thing, you can do it here and it will be applied to the next build that you run. So super useful there. Nice change overall there. Let's see. Lot to talk about here. I'm excited to be on the show today talking about a little bit of this here. So let's go ahead. I want to talk about a couple other features. I see a couple questions trickling in here as well. So talk about that. I'll answer some of these questions here in just a minute. I want to talk about some of these other quick features. Okay, cool. I thought I was lagging here a little bit. We made some changes to the quick swap tool. I'm a big fan of these in particular. So quick swap now has this unique button up here at the top. It's this lightning bolt indicator here. You can now quick swap directly at any time from any place in the app. So what quick swap does is it replaces all of your players that are out with some other player that fits in, the best projected player that we can fit into that spot. So a very useful way of getting players quickly out of your lineups when you don't have a lot of time. What we added here is now a notification that will specifically tell you, let's go ahead and find Bryce again, because I know he's in my lineups. if you have a player that is out of your lineup. So you can see when I uncheck Bryce Harper, which is, basically what would happen if he ended up getting ruled out, maybe he's not in the Phillies lineup, this turns red and it kind of shakes, right? It's actually kind of cool looking. So it gets your attention, right? You're building some lineups here and you see this all of a sudden shake. It means we got a starting lineup and you have a player in your lineups that's not in it. Really useful if you're up against lock and you need to make sure that you have players that are playing ball that night in your lineups. If you click this, it'll now say, this is Bryce Harper's out. He's not in your player pool. He's not playing here. And you can swap him by swapping all out players, but we have a new swap option here, which I think is super useful for baseball. In the past, you'd have to swap him with the next best available player, and that could be any player on the slate. Now you can swap him in with the best available player from the same team. So in this case, we maintain your Philly stacks and swap in Bryce Harper with Schwarber and Castellanos in all of the lineups here. Super useful for high correlation sports to maintain those stacks when you need to do a quick swap. This has actually been my preferred method of late swapping this baseball season period now. I haven't even actually touched late swap very much at all. I've just been doing this late swap with all out players and then best from the same team. Another thing that's cool now about quick swap is you can do multiple quick swaps in a row. You used to only be able to do one and then you'd have to reopen it. So now let's say, for example, let's say for some reason we weren't able to swap in Schwarber or Castellanos into Harper's spot. What you'd get a message that says Bryce Harper was moved from, say, 35 lineups, and these guys were added combined to 35 lineups, but 10 lineups still have Bryce Harper. Well, then you could go in there. We clicked apply on this one, right? Now we could go in and say all out players swap with the best available player, right? And then apply again, and then download a final entries file where everything is nice and cleaned up and we don't have any out players in our lineup. So the combination there of the red indication, letting you know you have players that are out and being able to swap to the next best player from the same team is really a game changer. If you're like me, I've got notifications turned on when lineups are coming out, and I'll set lineups for the main slate and then maybe pay attention. Maybe by lock we're missing the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks lineup or something like that, right? Some of these West Coast games, and maybe you're keeping an eye out for when those lineups come out, and then you finally get the lineup an hour after lock, but you don't know, do I have any of these guys that aren't playing? Do I need to make any swaps? Now you can just come right back to the build that you ran earlier that day, pull up the slate, and if this thing is red, it means you need to make a move. Click it, best available from the same team, apply, and you're good to go. Download that entries file and re-upload it. So again, I was thinking right before I went live, some of these features, they're not the flashiest things. They're not gonna jump at you like, wow, bright flashing lights. But when you're using Sabersim every day to build these baseball lineups, these things are just really nice quality of life changes here that will improve your process quite a bit. So, okay, cool. So I wanted to touch on, so I saw a question had come in from Dante here. He said that when I make adjustments to the team totals, I noticed on the projections page, it no longer highlights the changes in red or green. Yeah, so that's something we're just working on a fix there, to be completely honest with you, Dante. Was a bit of a small visual bug that got introduced on this most recent release. So what Dante's saying here, if you bump the Brewers up, that the color indications on the players are no longer showing up. So if we look, we're not getting the color indications. The projections themselves are still being updated. They are still increasing. So what's actually happening here is both the SS Proj and the My Proj column are changing. And the projections on the back end are actually changing. So if you use team totals a lot, you can still use them. No issues there. But the color indications there are not showing up. So cool. So I wanted to do a kind of a quick demo here. I know I breezed through some of those new features here pretty quickly. I just wanted to introduce everybody to those, talk about those a little bit. I want to go a little bit deeper here real quickly and talk maybe for people that aren't as familiar with Sabersim about how our process kind of works and how some of these new features fit into the broader process here. So as I go through this, again, feel free to fire away at me if anybody has any questions about anything here, but I wanted to talk about the process overall. So let's go ahead and get a fresh build going here. And while this is building, so I'll mention here, what really differentiates Sabersim in particular is we simulate games. And instead of just providing average projections or just average, even ceiling projections, floor projections, just like a single number, we simulate each baseball game out play by play thousands of times. And that allows us to capture both the full ranges of outcomes of a player and also the correlations of other players in that game. And when you build your lineups, we incorporate that data automatically. If you're signed up with if you're signed up for Sabersim via RunPure, you're pulling in the RunPure sports projections, core players, player pools, all that kind of stuff, but it still gets an opportunity to rest on the Sabersim simulation. So you get the advantage of kind of using that powerful content from RunPure and stacking it on top of the Sabersim projections. But you can see even for, let's talk again about Bryce Harper, right? We've got an average projection of 9.05 fantasy points. If we click into his name, you can see what his real range of outcomes actually looks like in the Sims. And this is actually one of the things that's this is a good visualization of why average projections aren't very useful on their own, right? What really is a 9.05 fantasy point projection? We can see it here in this graph, right? What does that actually tell us about Bryce Harper's upside and his floor and his overall outlook for that particular slate? It's not very much, right? It's not very descriptive of the whole. It also doesn't tell us anything about how he's correlated to other players on his team, right? I think a lot of people intuitively have a sense that, yeah, hitters in baseball are correlated, but it starts to get a little difficult when you're talking about, how much should that be a factor for me on smaller slates? How much should that be a factor for me when talking about certain batters being next to each other in the same order? How much should correlation matter, period? How much should I value other factors like just raw upside or ownership or that kind of thing, right? So we have these correlations precisely quantified here. And you saw here, I just a second built these lineups. All I did, I clicked the build button and I clicked start new build with default settings here. I didn't touch a thing. And you can see we're getting good GPP lineups without having to do really any work at all, right? We can look, let's jump over to our stacks right off the bat. 5 2s, 5 3s, 4 3s, 4 2 2s, 5s, all these good kind of stacks here. So are these lineups right out of the gate perfect? Obviously not. There's definitely still opportunities to add value here, but our goal with Sabersim, whether you are new to a sport or you are an expert in the sport, is to automate all of the busy work that you typically have to do on other traditional optimizers just to get good lineups to start from. Because we understand what full ranges of outcomes for players look like and how correlated they are to other players, we can get you to a much stronger foundation much faster than you can get to with other traditional optimizers out there. So this is kind of the point where I'll pick up into what we had talked about before, right at the start of the stream. So one of the other awesome advantages to Sabersim is that we automate the work of getting your lineups out of your tools and into your correct contests better than any other tool out there as well. If you've ever messed around and had a mistake made when you're editing your CSVs, or you're rapidly trying to enter manual lineups into DraftKings at the last second, you know how painful that can be. That's where the entry editor really shows its value, right? You click this fill entries button. You saw me just download my entries file and upload it in one click a minute ago. There's a lot of power here. I keep kind of showing an example where I just keep using the same 20 lineups. But if you've got, let's say I want to do, let's say this build here is my 3 max build, right? So I have 3 lineups over here. And this build is my 20 max build. And let's also build a single entry real quickly here. We don't need 500 lineups. But let's quickly build a single entry lineup as well. And I should mention here as well, I know I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but a lot of exciting things to talk about when I'm talking about Sabersim. You'll see, I'm calling this my single entry build, right? Why is it building 100 lineups? Well, another really cool thing about Sabersim is that we never just build the number of lineups that you need to enter into your contests. we build this big pool of lineups, and it lets you make decisions dynamically after the lineups have been built to get everything dialed in where you want without having to go start over from the very beginning and readjust exposures and things like that. So I'm building my so-called single entry build here, maybe my main lineup for that particular slate. I've got 100 to work from. I can come in here real quickly and maybe say, you know what? I want to fade Shohei in my single entry tonight, right? Now, boom, get another lineup, another option here. Maybe I don't want to play Mr. Pilkington either. And now I've got a lineup that I like, right? And you see all these lineups are 5-2 stack, right? Not just blindly eating all the chalk, 89% total lineup ownership. Got some low-owned pieces in here, some lower-owned Phillies bats, Toronto bats, right? Get a good-looking lineup here. But what I wanted to show is now we can go in, fill our entries here, and just fill our entries one by one into each of these, right? So check this out. So I can do lineups, one lineup. I'm going to use the exact fill method here, which means it's only going to fill contests where the number of entries matches exactly the number of lineups. And I can go, boom, fill 2 out of 15 contests, 3 max, get my 3 max lineups, fill all my 3s, done. Go to my 20 max lineups, fill all my 20s, done. And I'm in business, right? Entry file downloaded, uploaded to DraftKings. If you've ever done that with CSVs, now you get a little bit of muscle memory for it, but it feels like you're up under the clock, and it feels like it feels a little risky if you're trying to get all of your lineups into the exact right entry file in the CSVs when you have 5 minutes before lock. Sabersim automates all of that here for you with the entry editor. So really useful feature there as well. Let me take a look here. I don't see any other questions that have trickled in here. So the last thing I want to talk about here, and I talked kind of quickly about, the value of using these simulations to pull in the ranges of outcomes and correlations when you're building your lineup before lock. And I talked a little bit about quick swap here as a tool of getting players that are out of your lineups after lock, right? And I think this is a really powerful tool for baseball in particular. But if you ever need to do a full late swap build, right, you need to totally rebuild your lineups. You can do that on Sabersim as well by just toggling on late swap here, telling us what contests and lineups that you need to swap. And you'll get to swap those lineups, rebuilding them with all of the same data that you got to before lock, right? All of the same, all of the same value that you got before lock. Obviously, the data is going to change as simulations run and news breaks after lock here. But if one thing that's really difficult if you used other tools out there is trying to late swap and maintain stacks and ownership balance and exposures when you're doing a late swap build. Because we still get to take advantage of the correlation and the sims and ownership when you're running a late swap build, makes it very easy, especially if there was if there was really big news, we got a totally different Angels lineup than expected, and you need to late swap a bunch of lineups. You can come in here, run this late swap build, rebuild these lineups easily here around the players that have already been locked in, and get a new set of lineups that's totally ready to build here. So. Cool. What other questions do you guys have for me here today? It's quiet. It's quiet in my chat here. That I am here to answer questions. Happy to walk through anything I can. Give any tips and tricks. But I hope that, for those of you that have already been signed up with Sabersim here, that you've been enjoying some of these new features. I think, again, it really, once you're using it, once you're in the feel for it, you can really feel the difference it makes. In particular, if you've been using Sabersim, I know there's a few of you out there that are using Sabersim, using it to build your lineups, but haven't quite moved up to using the entry editor yet. Highly recommend giving the entry editor a try now that it is so easily integrated into builds themselves. Really just simplifies the process of getting your lineups out. It's one of those things, I know it takes a little bit of a leap of faith, because editing that CSV and making sure your lineups get into the right entries is one of those things that, everybody's got their process of doing it, and it feels it feels a little hard to change that particular part of your process. But if you haven't tried out the entry editor yet, seriously, just give it a shot. Give it a practice go, maybe an hour before lock when you have plenty of time and you don't have to worry about trying to get it done at the last minute. And you'll see it really just automates a lot of that for you, makes your life a lot easier here. So, but okay, Dante says, last question. I see when a player gets scratched, it updates around the same time as Fantasy Labs. Is it fair to say it's connected to their updates? And can we get that switch to Underdog? And then the crying, laughing emoji. Yeah, we actually, so our data sources are pretty diverse. We've got a pretty redundant and multifaceted data collection system there. So it is not just borrowing directly from labs. We check a bunch of different sources and basically as quickly as we can update to news to run new sims, we will. So Underdog is a part of that as well here. So, but yeah, no, and speed is something that is always a priority for us. We're making sure that we pick up on updated news as quickly as possible, get new sims updated as quickly as possible, particularly in sports like NBA. You know how important speed is in the NBA world. A lot of times you've got news will break 5-10 minutes before a game starts. You need the data to update in a time sensitive manner. You need those sims to kick off in a time sensitive manner. So making sure those sims kick off quickly and run quickly is always a big concern of ours, especially in these sports where it matters. So definitely something we're focused on there. But good question. Cool. Kim had said, if I wanted to run 2 different builds and enter 10 from each into a 20 max contest, what's the easiest way to do this? Yeah, so to be honest, Kim, that is still a bit of a limitation with the way the entry editor is currently set up. You can't take different lineup sets and combine them into the same contest at the moment. It's just one of the limitations here. So I know that's been a pretty common request. People want to do that. They want to, even talking a little bit bigger here. I hear people that say, hey, I'm building 75 here. I'm building 75 here. I want to combine that into my 150. At the moment, you'll have to still mess around in the CSVs to get that totally done there. But that's something we do want to add in the future, the ability to basically even just incompletely fill a contest with an entry set, right? Because then you could put in 10 and then you could put in another 10. But at the moment, I don't have a great answer here for you there. What I would say, a lot of times when this question comes in, it's because people are trying to maybe take a significant stand one way on 10 of them, and then take a different stand on the other way. And I think you can somewhat get there with your exposures, right? If you want, maybe you've decided here, let's just pull up an example here. What do I have? Let me find a build where I have some extra lineups here. There's kind of like other tools to get some of this done. Like, let's say, for example, you wanted, 50% of your lineups to have Ohtani and Nola, and then the other 50 to have none of them, right? You can get part of the way here with setting max exposures to get these guys exactly the way you want. And maybe even you want to have exactly 50% of both, and you want both of them in the lineup when you have 50%, right? So you could do something like, let's go ahead and look at all of the NOLA lineups that don't have Ohtani. Oh, and we actually don't have any, but if we did, we could trash those, right? So we could say, I want, basically now we will have in our pool, we'll have 50% of our lineups will have Nola and Ohtani as the pitchers, and the other 50% will have neither of them. So there's still a lot of tools that you can kind of use on the Sabersim app to get things where you want them here. But I know regardless, this is something people have asked for before. So, and then Renee asks a good question here about Showdown on FanDuel and locking players into different multiplier positions. So if you want to lock players into certain multiplier positions, you'll have to do it after the build has been built. The reason for this is kind of a data thing with FanDuel. The short version of it is they don't give a different player ID to the same player used in a different multiplier spot. So it's very hard for the builder to understand if a player's been locked in 2 different multiplier positions. It's not an insurmountable problem for us, but it's just an annoying quirk there. So what I would recommend here is go in and build your lineups. Give yourself a big pool to work with too if you're going to be doing this. So bump up that pool size up to like 1,500 or so. And then when we build these lineups, you can lock these players into those positions in the build screen, right? As opposed to doing it beforehand, you can lock them in here in the build screen, and you should be able to get that done. We'll give this a quick test and see how this goes, but we should be able to do this here. So this is a bit of I see in this particular example, it's Looney at captain, Poole at star, and Green at pro. So a full fade of Curry and Luka in the multiplier positions, we might not be able to do here. And if we can't, I'll show you a better way. I'll show you what we can do instead. But what you would do here is lock Looney in. Oh yeah, it doesn't seem to like that. Okay. So because Luka and Curry are so well projected, it doesn't look like it's going to let me do that. So what I would do here then, if you're still running into issues, is give these guys a boost to their point projection, right? Make sure that if you want a locked in Looney captain, locked in Poole at star, and locked in Green at pro, I would just make those guys your top 3 overall projected players, right? So make Looney, give Looney 60 points, right? Give Poole 58, 57, and give Draymond 55, right? And maybe we even knock down Luka a little bit just to help this out a little bit. And this will signal to the builder, hey, these are the guys I want to see in my multiplier spots, right? So now when we go in here and build lineups, and at this point, we probably don't even need to build as many. Let's make sure. Yeah, we should get the players that we're hoping to get there. So you can get a lot done on the build screen. You can adjust projections a lot, or you can adjust exposures a lot. You can get a lot done there. But if you're finding, if you're taking a big stand here, you may have to do a little bit of that by editing projections, just so the builder itself kind of knows the strategy you want to take on the slate. And now you see here, we're getting those guys in the multiplier spots like we like. So if we want, 100% Looney MVP, we can do that here. Huh. That's strange. Okay, I may have to check on that in particular. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're good. I think it was just taking a second to update there. And then we can go Poole here. And we can go Draymond here, right? And now we're finding that we can get those builds exactly the way we want them here because we bumped up those projections. So that should be a pretty good way to do it. Cool. All right. I don't see any other questions here coming in for today's show. So I think we'll go ahead and cap it off there. Appreciate everybody that joined in here, watched live, came and hung out with me here for a half hour today. I will be right back again here next week on the Run Pure Sabersim show. Hopefully back here with AP, talking a little bit more strategy, talking about Sabersim, answering your guys' questions. So until next week, good luck. Don't forget to get signed up with the Sabersim add-on on your Run Pure Sports subscription. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video on the YouTube channel. I'm sure Simon's going to like hearing me say that one. And for this week, that'll be it. Let's get out of here.